Darling in the Franxx' second opening has been dropped into our midst, and with it a wave, pun intended, of hidden meaning and symbolism. This is an exceptionally well-crafted opening, and so we're here to hopefully dig out all there is to find buried among its depths. Hello everybody, I'm PhenomSage, and watch as I overanalyze 90 seconds of glorified death flags and Infinity War memes.
I don't feel so good.
Throughout the opening, the use of water as a whole is immediately apparent, and above just being a gorgeous aesthetic, it is both fitting and foreboding in its thematic weight. This ties into what many have observed about Darling's connections to Norse mythology, which we'll be talking about later in the analysis with some more specific imagery. We begin with 02 descending into an ocean as images of generally all the higher powers in the series come into view. What's interesting to note here is that not only do all of the people in view represent some sort of obstacle or antagonistic force that 02 has had to deal with, but their placement and pose in this descent seemingly hint at their disposition and motivations. Nana and Hachi at the bottom, concerned only with the orders they've been given to look after Squad 13, Papa and APE looking downwards, indicating their desires and plans for the planet they've taken as their own, viewed high above from their Sky Fortress cosmos, 9 Alpha staring at the center of the screen, focused exclusively on 02 and possibly by extension Hero, and finally at the very top, Dr. Franxx lifting his head towards the sky, communicating lofty or ambitious goals he's harbored for the entire series. That is the reason for creating our test team, and potentially much more. We finished this descent with 02 landing in the hands of a giant Klaxosaur, the one that we saw from the end of episode 15. Notice the beast's behavior during this cut. It doesn't catch 02 out of malicious intent or harmful desire, but almost does so with a delicate sense of care and love, holding her gently as she gazes out onto the ocean. This alludes to a deeper side behind not just this beast, but the relationship that it shares with 02. Could this relationship be shared among all Klaxosaurs? It's also during this shot that we see a single wing sprout from 02's back, of course mirroring the Gian metaphor that has been so prominent throughout the series. The idea that 02 and Hero will only be able to fly when they have each other. Keeping with the ocean theme, 02 dissolves into bubbles before we get into the signature title reveal, and then continuing into the opening proper. In this following scene, we begin with Hero stranded in the middle of the ocean alone, drifting as he reaches up towards the light. This will be relevant in a minute, just hold on. From here, in the background of Hero, we begin our sequence highlighting the main characters of the show, which I'd like to take a moment to say is far better than the PNG cutouts they used for opening 1. Goro and Ichigo enter into frame as we see them under a deep sleep. Then Miku and Zorome next, also in a slumber. However, as we transition into Ikuno and Futoshi, we can see that they do not share this hibernation that the others do, instead standing and looking out into the distance opposite each other, showing their indifference to one another and a longing for someone else that they can't have. And finally, we fade into Mitsuru and Kokoro, who are also not in a tranquil sleep but for different reasons than Ikuno and Futoshi. They both reach out to the other as the waves slowly pull them apart, eventually dissolving into bubbles as well. Yeah, this is especially foreboding when you look at the ED, Kokoro in Mitsuru's embrace before the very next shot we see her alone, clutching herself in what appears to be a state of depression or solitude. Those Mitsuru death flags are too heavy right now, my god. After this sequence, we see the dissolve splash into Hero's face, seemingly snapping him out of the trance he was in before, and continue following him as he runs. The images of past events from the series passing by behind him, and the rest of Squad 13 joining in his pursuit one by one, before eventually culminating in every single member reaching out for the same light that Hero was at the beginning of this section. As they reach towards it and their hands cascade upon one another's, the camera pans up and from the light we see none other than 02 emerge from it, overjoyed as she descends down again, this time into the embrace of Hero. It's during this sequence where we see the exact same shot from opening 1 of 02 leaning in to kiss Hero. However, there is a stark contrast between the use of this kiss in each OP, despite it being the same cut. In the first opening, as 02 moved in to kiss Hero, the following scene resulted with Hero being launched back in shock before eventually being eaten by Stampede Strelitzia. This represents the chaos that Zero Two brought into Hero's life back then, and his hesitance and uncertainty regarding piloting a Franxx. However, in Opening 2, we can see the visuals mirror how these characters have changed and developed over the course of the series. As Zero Two kisses Hero this time, an explosion of sakura petals bursts from behind, and you can see the foam in the water form two wings, again acting as a visual allusion to the Gean metaphor, and that these two need each other in order to fly. The cherry blossoms transition us into our next scene where, as opposed to the first opening where Hero was scared and uncertain flying through the air, here we see him gleefully dancing and spinning with Zero Two as they fly around. Strelitzia in the background in its normal form as a way of not only representing the order and serenity found between these two, again contrasting Stampede Strelitzia in the first OP, which represented chaos, but also Hero never entering the Strelitzia at all, showing how his priorities and viewpoint have transitioned from wanting to pilot a Franxx to now only wanting to be with Zero Two. As Hero, Zero Two, and the Strelitzia all fly out of frame, we in turn have a flock of birds fly in frame before being replaced by the rest of our squad's Franxx units. Now, of course, this again ties back into the Gean bird symbolism, painting the rest of our squad as other forms of two halves needing each other to take flight. But from my immediate Google search, these are not actually Gean birds. At the same time though, neither was the bird at the beginning of episode 1, so I guess it's just bird symbolism in general to represent the Gean. Moving on from this scene, we get two quick and basic cuts of both the Nines and the Klaxosaur Princess. These likely foreshadow the large roles that these two forces will have in the coming episodes. But what's interesting to note is that there isn't any cut or scene dedicated to Papa, whether this is because they're saving his and APE's involvement as a secret for later on, or because his role will be smaller than we think is yet to be seen. It's in this cut with the Klaxosaur Princess where we can see something very unusual in the background, a sea of red and a Franxx unit behind her. Many have speculated on this already, but this is likely Ringorni, the mysterious object that APE has had under construction in order to realize their desires. Now, to understand some of the implications behind this shot and the opening as a whole, we have to delve briefly into the use of Norse mythology within Darling and the Franxx. Ringorni is found within this mythos as a ship, the greatest ship of all, which was ordered to be built by the Norse god Balder, and ended in becoming the pyre for he and his wife's funeral, sailing, burning, and sinking into the ocean. Balder's death would signal the beginning of Ragnarok, also known as the Twilight of the Gods, in which the cosmos themselves are destroyed and recreated, and the entire earth is swallowed into the ocean. The land would eventually re-emerge sometime later, and become repopulated by a pair of human survivors, Leif and Leifthra, which leads us into, as the Klaxosaur Princess dissolves away, we're led into our final scene. Hero and Zero Two facing each other completely naked, a way of representing a new beginning, free of their earthly tethers. Zero Two reaches to Hero and Hero to Zero Two. As their fingers touch, we see their beings pass through each other, continuing to smile and hold on while they coalesce. This directly mirrors the confrontation between the two in Strelitzia by the end of episode 15. Hero consoling Zero Two and telling her that together they are one before kissing. I'm not an anime lip reader, but it's also this line that I would presume Zero Two is telling Hero right before she passes through him and bursts into a swarm of sakura petals. The visual symbolism of sakura has been tried and true many times, but for those who don't know, it represents the Buddhist outlook of mortality, the idea that our life and existence in this world are both incredibly beautiful and brief, much like the blooming of sakura trees. The combination of sakura here and throughout the series at various points, all involving Hero and Zero Two by the way, are assumedly cluing us in on what Zero Two fans have been crying into their body pillows about all week. Her life and existence might be short-lived. As the sakura petals float away and Hero is left holding onto nothing, we can see that in contrast to his naked appearance with Zero Two, he is now back in his Franxx piloting outfit, which actually somewhat parallels Genesis in the Bible, interestingly enough, in which Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge and, being infected by sin, realize they're naked and become ashamed, covering themselves with clothes for the first time. Our final shot here looms on the image of Hero standing in front of Ringhorny and the sea of red that has consumed everything. Tying back into our talks of Norse mythology, Ringhorny and Balder becoming the catalyst for Ragnarok the end of the world. There are two alternate parallels you could make here. One is the representation of 02 as Balder, who dies from mistletoe and is sent to hell, becoming the trigger for the end and beginning of all things. Or on the flip side of that, you have the representation of Hero and 02 as Leif and Leifthasir, the human couple who repopulated the Earth after it re-emerged from the ocean. It's worth noting that when the Earth re-emerged, Balder came back from hell and lived prosperously with the remaining gods. So if either of these parallels say anything about 02's role in the story, we could be looking at a happy ending after all. Of course, I've only scratched the surface of Darling's use of mythology to briefly explain the context of this opening. If you're interested in learning more, I'll have links to all of my sources down below, including an excellent video by Nearly Unread, delving more in depth on all the ways mythology is explored in this series. After mourning the disappearance of 02, Hero gathers his composure and stares directly at Ringorni before being dissolved away himself into a screen of white, marking not only the end of the opening, but also the end of our analysis. To reiterate, this is a beautiful and rich opening full of depth and nuanced meaning, tying both into Japanese culture itself and even different mythologies altogether. I could not be happier with how it turned out, and I'd actually like to directly give praise to all of the people I know who were involved in the making of it. Name butcher incoming. Koji Uya, Toko Yatabe, Kota Michishita, Megumi Kono, and Jun Uemura are all responsible for the great key animation, bringing the subtle movements to life and really selling you on this underwater atmosphere. Masayoshi Tanaka and Shota Iwasaki acting as supervisor and mecha supervisor respectfully, and finally the series director himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Atsushi Nishigori, also extended his hand to this opening, responsible for not only the direction but the storyboard as well. Nishigori is the main man who brought this opening to life in its expansive depth and creativity, and it's hard for me not to appreciate what he's done with not only it, but the series as a whole. And a special thank you to Mitro in the comments, who gave me the information on all of the staff involved with the creation of this OP. But that has been all from me for this Darling in the Franxx opening analysis. Thank you all so much for watching as usual. There was a lot to cover and dissect, so I hope you guys appreciated the closer inspection and possibly had your eyes open to something new. Let me know in the comments what you found the most interesting here, and maybe analysis of your own in the opening that I didn't mention. If you enjoyed anything I had to say, I would really appreciate it if you liked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see any of my content in the future, and of course, as usual, have a great day.